Today's meeting of Support Services Committee to order. I have a motion to approve last month's meeting minutes, please. Motion made by Supervisor Driscoll, second by Supervisor Wild. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. Okay, first we'll start with IT. Mr. Colvin.
Morning.
Morning.
First is a request a resolution to extend our contract with Spectrum for our internet connection. We have usually over time we use the internet more and more, and then we're kind of reactive after we have complaints to increase the speed. So I kind of looked at it ahead of time to put us where we should be. But then I also approached them to review everything we have, and then overall as a county we can spend $250 less a month, but increase the speed on every connection. So I'm asking to extend the contract with them for that.
Motion made by Supervisor Sokol, second by Supervisor Leggett. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
And then the second resolution is to continue the theme of non-compliance. I guess we've been building tourism for many years for our services, but we don't have an MOU in place, and the auditor just noticed that. So we're asking to put an MOU in place to keep building for services.
Motion made by Supervisor Leggett, second by Supervisor Driscoll. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
And then just to have a discussion to get some guidance. Right now I've been looking at our antivirus and how we pay for it, and by merging all of our various county accounts into one big account we can get a much better rate. But then in the process of that I've asked, well geez, why can't we extend that to the towns and villages and in the city and such, and vendors are agreeable to do that. I'm not really sure how to approach if I can, should, or shouldn't kind of thing. And everybody pays for antivirus. You usually pay anywhere from $20 to $100 a seat, depending how you do it. But by combining it, right now I've got it down to $9 a seat, and I've got another vendor that says you can beat that. I'm still trying to hear back from. But can we offer to the town where we pay the bill, and then they would pay us back each year for whatever seats they wanted? And I want to see if that's an okay thing to do, if we should do it. How do I do that?
I don't know if it's legal, but I totally support that.
Wow, yes, okay. Let me ask Julie, and then because the town supervisors, you will be on the receiving end, your input. Is that something that purchasing would be involved in, Julie?
No.
Okay.
My guess is it would require a municipal or intermunicipal agreement, so that there is an arrangement and...
Okay, Supervisor Garrity.
Yeah, that would be just an agreement with the county that we piggyback on these contracts
For antivirus?
antivirus.
And that's something we have a lot of intermunicipal agreements.
Shared services.
Any other questions? Does that make sense? You agree with that, Supervisor Leggett?
Absolutely.
Supervisor Hyde?
Supervisor
Supervisor Thomas?
Type it up, send it out to us still.
Okay.
We would have to type it up.
Who would do that?
Okay, so I guess contact maybe the county attorney, for wording, and then it would come back to committee, or is that the process I would do, or just do it?
Committee approves it.
Oh, okay.
And we send it along. We send along to legal and let the council get your information and send it out to each town.
Okay.
I mean, it's going to save money.
Yeah.
So this would be a good savings of money. So I'll entertain a motion from the committee to approve this plan that Mr. Colvin is proposing from IT.
Okay, for the merging, I'll make that, for the merging of antivirus and extending it to the towns and villages.
Right, message or motion made by Supervisor Leggett, second by Supervisor Wild. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. That sounds like a good program, Mike.
Thank you. And the other thing, just to throw a discussion out there, it seems like at budget time, some big things get thrown out, and you have about 2 minutes to ask questions and make a decision on something. So I'm making it known now, something I'm going to bring up in a few months from now, so if anybody wants to be involved ahead of time, it's not like a surprise here, make a decision kind of thing. We need to reinvent our website, and it's beyond the capabilities that we can do anymore to bring it up to, into the future. Keep up with all the devices and things, make it interactive and do more things for the public. And we've looked at a lot of them. So it's not a cheap thing to do. There's an initial upfront cost of about $80,000 and $5,000 or $6,000 a year to maintain. The maintenance isn't bad, but it's that upfront cost that I'll be looking at budget time to do for next year. Right now, this is the first time really speaking of it. I'm going to put like a work group together to come up with all of our requirements, what we need, kind of come up with that decision, is it worth moving forward with it or not. But I just want to make sure everybody's aware of it now, and if anybody wants to be involved, to offer that out there, and so that you know what's out there, so after we leave today and questions come up, there's time to actually think about it.
Supervisor Bramer?
I don't know what we already have, but I know that the city technology committee has reached out to you, and they're updating their website and going through some vendors. Maybe there's some shared services opportunities there as well. We use the same vendors.
Yeah.
To update, and then they pay, because I know they pay a maintenance fee of like $5,000 here too.
Yeah, it's actually where I got my numbers from is the same place as the city.
Okay.
And there's some advantages to using the same vendor within the same area because the sites would interact. You still got to have your initial site creation, so there's no...
That's going to have to go out via RFP.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Supervisor Wild?
Mike, requirements and expectations are exceeding our abilities. So you said you're going to get a group together. When you pull that group together with the specs, can you have must-haves versus like-to-haves?
Yep.
So we can kind of pare it down. To me, it seems like $80,000 is a lot of money for a website that, and I'm not sure how many hits we have on the county. I would think tourism gets more hits than the county does, but I'd kind of like to get an understanding of that before we jump into an $80,000. And if we can continue to limp along for a few more years like we are and maybe shift it around to something else, I think that's more appropriate.
Okay. Yeah, and that was my whole
Yeah,
point.
I just think about the requests we have for money in front of us. Is it a resource officer versus a website? I'm going to go resource officer, right? So you're always going to be on a bottom end of the stick no matter what happens. So we need to kind of find a way to make that happen so that you get at least the minimum stuff that you need to make sure that we're viable. And then we can talk about the increased cost for some of the other things that we know we'd like to have.
Yeah, definitely.
Further discussion for Mike? Okay, sounds like good heads up.
And then last one, we had like an unfinished business. Still looking for our backup vendor. Heard from a couple that are interested, but I made contact with a bunch last week, so I'm still pursuing through them to get someone who's willing to come on as that second. And that's all I've got.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Julie Butler, purchasing.
Thank you, Chairman. My agenda is very quick today. We require an annual resolution to adopt changes to the purchasing policy. The version that I sent out a couple of weeks ago for comment is actually not the version that was sent out on Friday with the agenda. I found out Thursday afternoon that there are uniform guidelines for federal grants, and it's required that they be in our policy as of June. So the last 3 pages of the policy include those federal guidelines. We're doing a lot of them already, actually probably 99% of what's in here. It just needed to be added to the purchasing policy. For any towns or other municipalities that do receive federal grant funds, I recommend that this be included in your policies as well. It's a uniform guidance so that everybody's got accountability for the grant funds.
And that's incorporated also on page 7?
Correct. That's the reference to Appendix A, which is attached. The other changes were just minor as far as updating the contact information for our preferred sources. We also included language about our national contracts to make everybody aware that these are the ones that we're members of. That's on page 5. And other than that, those were the main changes.
Julie, you said you would recommend to the towns that they include these things also. Would that automatically happen, or does that need to be communicated? Certainly, we have 5 town supervisors here.
Well, I can certainly send out an email because of the late date last week. I had to make sure I got it into my policy first.
Sure.
And then I was going to talk about it here to let the towns know that they need that in their policies as well if they receive federal grant funds or may in the future. So I can send an email out to everybody letting them know that that's a requirement.
Seem appropriate. We need a motion. Entertain a motion to approve the updated policy. Supervisor Wild makes the motion, second by Supervisor Sokol. Further discussion, questions for Julie? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
And the only other thing I wanted to report was that again, OGS and SAMPO this year combined for a conference, which was free to New York State municipalities. So I sent both my employees. They came back with great information and saved the county $500 again this year.
Very good.
Nothing more.
Okay. Anything else for yes?
I
Supervisor
do.
Wild.
Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. Julie, I've heard that in the past, and maybe if I'm wrong, and please don't take offense to this, but I heard that your team was backed up with a bunch of RFPs. And I'm wondering if you still have a backlog or whether
We
you've
do
got
not.
Okay.
We hired a new employee in February. Well, she started in February. She's helped us catch up to a great degree. There's always going to be things that involve more research, that are going to take a little bit longer. But we're typically months in advance of the expiration of current bids or current contracts. So if there's a holdup, it might be on the department end, not on our end.
Okay.
Because we've got a pending list of when everything expires that's currently active in our office.
So just as a follow-up then, you're directly involved with a lot of the shared services activities also, if I'm not mistaken?
We are.
And are we making any progress? And I know Supervisor Beatty isn't here for me to ask as the chairman of that committee, but I was just curious if there's...
We continue to track our annual savings. I have reports for each of the municipalities. Just as of last week, I sent out, emails, letters, and faxes to the fire departments to take that next step with the fire department. Supervisor Garrity has been nice enough to schedule a meeting up in Warrensburg June 6th at 7 o'clock for the fire chiefs to attend. So that's where we're currently focusing on top of the other savings that we're already generating for the municipalities.
Any other issues for you and your team that we can help with?
Responses, to emails where we request estimates or, information. That's been a long-standing issue since we started the program. And we might get a response and say, I'll get you, and the town will say, I'll get you something in a couple of days. We don't see it, so then it's follow-up after follow-up. It's just frustrating, but we do our best to try to get what we need when we need it.
Anything else for Julie or support services in general? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Delayed motion made by Supervisor Driscoll, second. Supervisor Leggett. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, folks.